So this is Let's Talk, and my guest today is Sudeep Sen, who is a poet, writer and photographer. So welcome to Let's Talk.
Thank you very much.
Sudeep. And we normally, the purpose of these interviews is to basically go through and find out a little bit about how you've got into the area that you're sort of working as at the moment, as a poet and a photographer and a writer. So tell us a little bit about how did you get started?
So I have to say that, literature, music, art, all the lovely things in life, so to speak, is very much part of a Bengali landscape. I come from a very specific part of India, which is Bengal, which is the sort of the east, the state of Bengal. And pre-partition Bengal would include Bangladesh, so that's the entire Bengali-speaking area, the original one. However, I grew up in Delhi, but in a Bengali household with all the ethos or baggage that the Bengalis carry. But in a sense, it was a privilege because access to the arts was almost osmotic. It was there without being forced down. Also, of course, I have to admit that I was growing up at a time when men were supposed to be engineers and doctors. All this was great, but you have to have a job, and jobs at the time meant these are the areas where you would have more chance to make a living, good living. So I was a science student, So I studied physics, chemistry, biology, architectural and engineering drawing all the way through school, and I was actually almost fairly serious about studying architecture, but somehow or the other I just said, let me just give it a go. I mean, I was always interested in reading and writing, and I wrote my first terrible bad poem in high school, and continued writing terrible bad poems from my undergraduate years, but I persisted because it was more a passion than anything else. And I told myself that, listen, I'll give it a go. If it all doesn't work out, I can always resort to something else, And that's really how it started. So I come from a sort of science background with an interest in architecture, and all that sort of feeds into my writing and my photography.
So it's science-based, and you mentioned the partition coming from a kind of Bengali. We've lived in Ireland here, and we've gone through our troubles here.
Yes.
Or it would have been about sort of 15 maybe years after the partition that you would have been born. So how would life have been around about that sort of time for you?
So I'm very much a post-partition child. So I didn't see the turmoil and the difficulties which my grandparents and my parents might have seen. It's almost like partition stories. So India was partitioned on two flanks, actually, Pakistan and India, which is, that's much more recorded in a sense. And then on the east, it was Bangladesh and West Bengal, what became Bangladesh and West Bengal. So a lot of it was just stories from my extended family, books I read, films I saw, nostalgic songs. But it didn't affect me in that kind of direct way. So I grew up in a very democratic, cosmopolitan Delhi with three mother tongues, Bengali, Hindi, and English. So it was, these are languages I've been speaking ever since I've been a young child. And but as an adult, I see both the political, intellectual, and emotional ramification of what partition is all about. And we are sitting in Ireland, and I'm very aware of the situations here and the changing geopolitics of the place. Not terribly dissimilar in terms of, people are people at the end, and the rights of what they want are very similar to the rights people want elsewhere in the world. and it's all about equality, humanism, fair play, and so on. I mean, these are all very universal things. Free yourself from the colonizer, so to speak, and so on.
Your science, then, we've gone quite a distance in science from the sort of 80s and things to now. So what particular things in the scientific world would have influenced maybe your writing in your early days?
Oh, many things. Actually, there's a lovely story. So when I was in college, I think one of our professors was teaching the metaphysical poets, John Donne, Spencer, and so on. And there's this famous poem. There's several famous poems, but one of them is The Compass. One of them is The Sun Rising, Busy Old Fool, Unruly Sun. Now, when we were taught that, we were just given the literary and historical sort of background, cultural background to the poem. But what astonishingly my professor missed, and everybody around us missed, was the poem was actually written when Donne had access to Copernicus's first telescope. So when he looked through the telescope, his entire vision of the cosmos changed. So it's a very, very important fact that is rooted in a discovery of science or scientific tools that led to writing a poem. But that was never discussed. So as a science student, I was alive to all those things. So I could sort of see the other side of things. Also, just physics and light interested me a lot. So it's not unsurprising that my latest book is called Fractals. Yes, very much from that world. And I think science has shaped my writing. So in terms of structure, I started out being a fairly formal poet. So I would write in strict forms, sonnets and villanelles and canzones and rhyme. And it was a good starting point because partly I was mentored by some people I really admired, and they said it's very important to learn the classics before you can break the rules. You wouldn't be producing Stravinsky's Rites of Spring if he wasn't properly trained as a classical musician. Even though when you hear it for the first time and to an untrained ear, it's almost atonal and dissonant. So all that helped a lot. My interest in meter and rhyme was again prompted by mathematical equations and physics. The way I look at objects is very much influenced by the way I used to think about light when I was thinking of physics and refraction and reflection and so on. So it's always been a very, very strong shadow in my writing space. Though it's never obvious, but if you just have to kind of, reflect a little bit to see the refractive index in my literary writing. So science has always played important part, and I have to say that I grew up in a space where the sciences and the arts were not separated as hierarchies. One wasn't more important than the other, because realistically, as a holistic thing, it's one side of your brain is logical and the other side is creative, and it's all the science and the creative aspects of our lives are working always in consonance. But yeah, the both are very important as far as my literary work is concerned.
We have more on the way, so please subscribe to this channel and check out the link below if you'd consider becoming a patron to help us keep making more content. Thanks for watching.